stable place, time, location that you can always communicate, ask your questions, and receive information from us. Today, you also know it's Friday because I'm wearing an orange shirt, but you also know it's Friday for a bunch of other great reasons. And maybe you can chime in with your favorite reason on why it's Friday, and we'll get that on the air. And if you want us to attribute it to you, even better. Okay, so because we know nobody just wants us to answer question after question after question about the big C word pandemic, I think it makes a lot of sense for us to use these opportunities to predict or lead turn things that many of us are anticipating or thinking about working through or working with or getting ahead of in the next few weeks or month or more. And so today, as I'll call it our push topic, I know this is going to be somewhat dry initially, but I'm going to talk to you about DD Form 2946. And right now your eyes are rolling, you're walking away from the camera. Don't, wait, stop. The title of the form is Telework Agreement. And I think telework has been a very big, important part of all of our lives the last year to 13 months. As you've heard me say a couple times, as we've been fighting through this fourth combat front called the pandemic or COVID, as you are fighting in the front, remember and document and think about what you want our new normal to be. What things do you want to keep? What things are we good at that we didn't even know we wanted, let alone knew how good we were at until we were forced to do so by the pandemic? And I assess that for many of us, many of you, telework is something that you are interested or want to keep, and you've been effective and efficient. And so now how do we do that? How do we make it part of our new normal, your new normal? And so that's the focus of that I've got a panel here with me today, both on and off camera. And I know that you don't want to talk about DD forms. You'd much rather talk about things. But that is the form. That is a telework agreement that I am very interested to answer your questions a little bit about, and hopefully give you examples or ideas on how it may or may not fit into your work-life balance. So with that, if we could go to the camera that shows the other two people that get the privilege of prettying up the screen a little bit. Speaking of pretty, there's Dano off to the left, Dan Osborne, the 412 Test Wing Tech Director, and also my senior civilian. Literally, he's 1.5 doors away from me, and when I have a civilian leadership or a civilian question or a civilian anything, I go, hey, Dano. And then, I don't know, 7 times out of 10, maybe just 5 times out of 10, he's like, hey, boss, that's a really good question. We should call Michelle. So because I know that's going to be my question to Dano, and Dano's going to call Michelle, we have Michelle Lovato, your civilian personnel officer here, also on screen with you today. They're going to push a little bit of information here, and if I can't give you a vision answer to the question, they're going to get you the specific answer. And if we don't have the talent in the room to answer your question today, we're going to take the note, and if you're willing to give us your information, we'll get it back to you direct. If you don't want to give us that information to get back to you direct, we'll try and get it to you in a future town hall or in another form like that. And then off camera today, I'll say moderating, so good luck with that, Chief, is Chief Dan Thompson. You may know him from the very famous and highly attended MSG town halls that he hosts, or that he moderates with Colonel Harris. So I know you're proficient at that, Chief, and good luck at this one. I'm a little bit more wily than your other boss, but I'm glad you're here. He's going to be the one answering your questions and then pulling them on, or it's getting them on the audio for us today. So, Chief, glad you're with us. Also off camera, we have 2 experts. I've got Mr. Dale Rydell. He's, among many things, he's a labor law expert that works in the JAG shop. So, Dale, thanks for being here. If anybody wants to talk to a lawyer, Dale's a great one to talk to, but I get first dibs, okay? So just for the record. And then also another key player in many lanes. Telework is one of them, but 3 or 4 major others. Miss Joan Amadio is here with us as well. She's going to be the one doing the deep research and handling a lot of questions that even stump Michelle. So Joan, again, thank you for being here with us today. And you may hear Dale and Joan and Chief. You will certainly hear Chief's voice off camera. So with that, let me talk to you about vision real quick. So when we got told max telework by DOD, max telework, and the governor of California said, stay home, go home, stay home, and we said as an installation, as a wing, if you can do mission at home, please do mission at home. We'll figure out and we'll clean up and we'll figure out the paperwork when the time comes. Well, folks, the time has arrived. The time is approaching for us to document the way and the how and the why, and frankly the where, you are going to continue to be able to work not at what would have been your primary duty location, your desk in a building on an Air Force base before. Some jobs are never going to be telework compatible. Some jobs that are telework compatible are never going to be remote work compatible. Some jobs are going to occasionally be telework in part and in-person in part, and some jobs are going to be schedulable as part telework, and other jobs are going to be random or pseudo-random for telework. So this is not ever going to be a one-size-fits-all scenario, and candidly, it will rarely be a one-size-fits-one job scenario all the time. So there are nuance after nuance after nuance, but we want to answer those questions and start to get at the left and right boundaries of those. So I'll let Dano and Michelle give some opening thoughts or opening comments, and then after that, we're going to go into some definitions, and they're going to keep me honest at 100% when I use the word remote versus telework and other things like that. So Michelle, we'll let you go first. You have any opening thoughts you want to push to the crowd?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Michelle Lovato. I'm part of the Force Support Squadron. I'm the assigned civilian personnel officer for Edwards Air Force Base. So I'd like to share today just to remind everybody that for civilians, telework is a part of government. It's a part of OPM strategies through DOD. There's DOD policy and Air Force. So given that telework is evolving, as General Higer mentioned, our new postures and our new normal is coming, it's here. So we are here as a resource to you, the civilian personnel supervisors of civilians, and also the employees. So you might have a lot of questions as we move forward, and we want to help you and your supervisor attain the best outcome regarding our telework program. So again, we're a resource. Ms. Joan Amodio is mentioned. She's the EMR LMR chief, and the telework coordinator within the 412 test wing also resides in the civilian personnel office. So again, my way ahead is utilize us as a resource, and we are here to support you. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Michelle. Michelle's going to, we're keeping score. Michelle's going to count how many times she has to correct me to 100% today. And I won't tell anybody what the over-under is, but I hope you didn't wager too much on that. So, Dano, go ahead.
All right. Afternoon, Team Edwards. It's a privilege to get a chance to be here with General Higer at the town hall and talk about something that's very interesting right now, right? We have a lot of, I would call it a polarization in our workforce of telework and then people that want to be at work. And our goal here today is I want to go over some guidance that we've received and kind of give you some expectation management. And then we're going to have a bunch of questions. I hope that the chief over there will farm out to us so we can help get you the answers to your questions to the best of our abilities. First off, I wanted to say this team has done amazing in the pandemic. It has opened up avenues I didn't think the Air Force would ever get to be honest with you. Being a traveler a lot for work and having to do VPN. I remember the 2 weeks before we went into the pandemic, this being up the range at China Lake in March, first week of March, and I couldn't VPN to work at night. It was pretty frustrating being on a China Lake range. It's only, an hour and a half drive from home at Eddie here. So having the VPN that they've done now with Cisco and Najaris has opened up the ability for us to actually do some great telework. Not everybody is telework eligible, right? We have touch labor, we have security, we have things in our mission that need to be done. That's going to be the balance, and that's going to be the deciding factors on which people can telework. Just a couple things that have come down in guidance I want to make sure you're all tracking. So we recently received an outstanding memo from our 4-star general at AFMC commander, and he provided the guidelines, right, from AFMC. If you read that guidelines, I'd encourage you to get it from your HRLs that have been sent out about a month ago. In that top executive summary, in that report, it actually talks about that these are guidelines and that there's further guidance coming from the Department of the Air Force guideline memo. So we are expecting a higher level guidance coming down that could change some of the guidance that AFMC has into play. But we are using AFMC guidelines now, and we'll go through that and talk about how they categorize different types of telework. And that'll be the goal today, is everyone walk away and be able to go get that guideline memo and read it and dissect it. I've done that. I got my book of knowledge here, and I've been going through and prepping and reading through to understand myself. So I think they've done a really good job in the guidelines, and I think it's going to help set the expectations on for our workforce. One last thing I'd like to mention is, we went into the pandemic, and then a lot of our workforce is young and have children they're taking care of. In our schools, we have Edwards proper, we have people at Lancaster, we have Kern, we have that much diversity at different school districts. They're all not coming back in the same way. So we expect to have some concern on what schools are going to go back full time. So we had a guidance that came out in November. Again, it came out in March and then November, and we just got the recent one on December 8th. That's an update. That memo actually gave General Higer the power to let the people take care of their children while they telework, which is normally not a requirement you can have as a teleworker. You have to be able to telework that time. That guidance expires on 30 June. It has expended twice before, so we don't know if it's going to extend. But I just wanted to let you know that that's out there till 30 June. So, and it's irrelevant of what HPCon General Higer sets the base installation at. That's a key point for you all to know, and something I learned during the research. After that, I'll be quiet now because I think the chief is giving me the next sign that we've got a lot of questions to come down. So, but those are some of the big guidelines, and as always, I'm looking here to help you. I'm here to serve you, the civilians, and my main goal is to put you at ease, to let you know we are embracing telework, but we have a mission to do, and that's the balance that I ask you as leaders, as we swore in our oath, as military and civilians, that you put that first as how we have to get our mission done, okay? And I look forward to some challenging questions.
All right, so the guidance that Daniel referred to that Michelle has in hand as well is AFMC as the MAGCOM leading the Air Force, frankly, and I really think the Air Force is leading the Department of Defense, although we're probably in a neck-and-neck race with the government civilians and active duty that are assigned in the National Capital Region. I have not been back to the National Capital Region since the beginning of the pandemic, but talking to a couple folks that have been there or are stationed there, it's really a different tenor. A lot of people that are not at their offices anymore in the NCR. That gives me a good indication deep into this pandemic that the DoD leadership, including our Department of the Air Force, have seen that they can continue to execute mission for jobs that are compatible, and they're trying to make some permanent changes because of that. In the field, I think AFMC is definitely leading the way, especially in the Department of the Air Force, and that makes sense. AFMC has approximately 60% of all of the Air Force's civilians, and so we should be the lead MAGCOM, and we are the lead MAGCOM. In addition to General Bunch being on point for this, Miss Young, our AFMC advisor, our AFMC CA, she has been very adamant and very on point for telework. And so there's a lot of goodness that's resulted from that. So the memo from General Bunch that Daniel highlighted is out and it's available. You can read it if you want it. You can ask any of the HRL. There's a guidebook, I think is the title. Did I get that right, Michelle? Yeah, a guidebook that is underneath that on what are the considerations and who's eligible. And then there's some FAQs, some frequently asked questions. If you hit an FAQ, we'll try to read the FAQ as the answer and then put a little localisms around it. If it's a question that we think should be in the FAQ and you ask, we'll go, that's a great question. Hey, AFMC, can you add this to the next version or next revision so that we can pay it forward for other folks in AFMC and other civilians across the Department of Defense. And so I want to emphasize one thing here. If you are a military member and you think, well, this is civilian telework and you're about to go run off and do something else and prepare for the Easter Bunny, don't. Right? There is a section in the guidebook that talks about telework for active duty members. So there are portions of this that are going to be applicable to you as the member. If you are a supervisor of only military members, for the same reason, you also need to pay attention because you may have some subordinates that telework is the right answer. Maybe not the right answer permanently, but the right answer on a recurring or even an episodic basis, and certainly the right answer as long as we're in a public health emergency, as we have been for the last year or more. So this is not just for civilians. If you're a military supervisor of civilians, you really need to pay attention. If you're a civilian supervisor of civilians, you're already here and you're already engaged. If you're a civilian employee, I know you're engaged and you have a lot of questions. So this is for all of the government airmen, the airmen. Sorry, contractors, I can't help, but you could potentially use Air Force guidance with your company as an example and see what their policies are. So If you need help, the CTFs and the local leadership can certainly help you out there. But that's why we're here. We're here to talk about those. So Chief said he's got a few questions in. Before we get to those questions, I want to go through definitions real fast. So Michelle, if you could just run down the list of terms, and then after you run down the list of terms, hit the definitions of them. That'll be just a few seconds here to read them. But it isn't as simple as, I telework. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, Michelle, thanks.
Absolutely, yes, sir. So we have categories of telework. I'll go through just broadly, but before I start, the reference I'm using is the DOTI 1035.01 36.816 Civilian Telework Program dated October 2018. And also the AFMC guide that our leaders have. Please see your HRL for more guidance from the AFMC perspective. So those definitions are contained within these references. So you can read more in detail, but I'll go over a few of them for general understanding. Full-time is when an employee performs telework from an alternate location on a full-time basis. However, this full-time telework is in the commuting area, meaning generally it's at their home. The telework agreement approves that teleworker to work full-time at home. The nuance to that is they can be recalled at any time to the work site. So the work site being Edwards or Plant 42 or your permanent duty location. So keep that in mind. Remote is defined as a full-time teleworker, regular recurring, so it hits all those definitions as well. However, they're working remotely from an alternate location that is outside the geographic area. For this situation, it is considered remote and it requires a personnel action to document the official location to where they work, which is outside of the geographic location. There could be pay impacts, so that's an important thing to know as a supervisor and an employee if you are going to request remote working. Also, and that's only eligible at this time for current employees, so we were waiting for additional guidance, sir, regarding how to hire remote. We do not practice that today, so if you have questions about that. And then there's a regular reoccurring, so you actually have a work schedule where certain days of the duty week you are working at an alternate location within the local area. And then finally, sir, the majority of our employees, about 56% of our employees that are eligible, are on a situational or ad hoc telework agreement. So that is a communication between the employee and the supervisor that I may work on Tuesday or Friday from home, but it is very unscheduled and episodic and on an as-needed basis. And just to dovetail to Mr. Osborne's comment, speaking from the government perspective, telework is not an entitlement. So please keep in mind when you request that there are various factors that determine the approvals or denials regarding your request for telework. But keep in mind the child care exception expires on 30 June. I just want to reiterate that. So, sir?
All right, yes, thanks, Michelle. So if your questions are around explanation of what is telework and what are the options around telework, we're happy to try and answer those, but I encourage you to read, and especially as a supervisor, I encourage you to read. Foot stomp for Michelle, it is not an entitlement. It is a privilege or a benefit. You have to have a position or duties, maybe not the full position, but duties that are telework compatible, and you also have to be a compatible employee. You know, if you're like me and you say, I work better in the office than I do sitting at home for a whole bunch of various reasons, maybe it's not for you. And there are other specific prohibitions. If you're interested, if any of those apply to you, I encourage you to talk to your supervisor and your HRL. Right now, there are fewer restrictions on employees that are past their probationary period than there are on new hires. And so if you are a new hire in your question or with your supervisor, I encourage you to emphasize that. Different rule sets will apply if you're considering employment or if you are a new hire also. So with that, why don't we kick off with the questions there, Chief?
Yes, sir, we can. Let me begin with, and I think you just said this, but it was a question pointed on there, and I think it'll come up again. So what is the actual major difference between situational and regular telework? Like, what is the clear delineated line between the two?
Okay.
Can I give a supervisor's example real quick, Michelle, and then we can give the technical answer. So a A regular and recurring teleworker is someone that I'll give you real examples. So a spouse of someone in my front office team has been on effectively permanent telework for the entirety of the pandemic. And this spouse has been able to do 100% of his entire duty every week for the last year at his house. So that is a telework permanent and recurring in the local area. There is someone literally on stage with me right now that is a part of their every week scheduled battle rhythm, has an alternate duty location on one specific calendar day every week. Those are examples of things that are permanent. The ad hoc examples that I have as a supervisor are that I have members of my team that are inside the front office where we have tried to push back against the pandemic, and my execs alternate, often in a pseudo-random, there's always a purpose behind it, but in a pseudo-random way, hey, tomorrow I'll be out of the office and telework from home such that so-and-so can be in the office. So we try not to have everybody in the office all at the same time in case we have a bad COVID event. And so that's a little bit more ad hoc. Michelle, correct me 100%, and then add in some additional definitions there, please.
Absolutely. So the question, as I understand it, what's the difference between ad hoc, situational, and regular?
Yes, ma'am. And I
Okay.
think it was, yes.
So going back to the 2946, the only difference in my eyes is, and well, it's in the guidance as well, is regular reoccurring is scheduled. It's actually in the telework agreement that Tuesdays and Wednesdays are worked from an alternate location, and it's locked in. It's ongoing, and it's on a reoccurring basis. Situational is, hey, a discussion between the supervisor and the employee that I have test reports, for example, to work on Friday. I'm going to ad hoc, situational, work that from another location. So the regular reoccurring is, just keep in mind, it is routine telework, meaning the work can be accomplished from another location on a regular basis, and it's outlined and it's approved in the 2946. For situational, employee and supervisor do not have to commit to every Wednesday or Friday, so it's very much a situational as needed basis. Yeah. So there's a difference.
So as an extension to that, another follow-up question just fits nicely into this question.
Okay.
Is can I telework when I'm sick but able to work from home? Even though I'm sick and I'm able to work from home, really probably shouldn't be in the office. Can I use that as a telework day, or do I have to take sick leave during that day?
So sick leave is a qualified benefit, meaning there's conditions how the supervisor would approve or disapprove. So if I understand the question, if you're sick under the guidelines of sick leave approval, you're incapacitated or you're not fit to perform duties, regardless if you're at home or at the work site. However, if that's a decision that the supervisor can take into consideration if they're able to perform work. And I wouldn't want to get into the middle of that, but generally you need to take sick leave regardless. However, if you're not incapacitated but you're able to perform, again, if you're on a situational telework, that's upon supervisor approval. So
Yes.
that's a decision for the supervisor.
Yeah, so I'll answer that with some hypothetical examples, Chief. So if I'm a supervisor of a civilian, and that civilian's job requires him or her to physically touch something, an airplane, for example, or to do 100% of their work inside a vault, in those scenarios, no, you'd have to take sick leave. I think the basis of the question is I'd really rather not burn sick leave if I'm able to work, but I just can't be in the office because, as we all know in the pandemic, if you're sick, stay home, right? And there's other extrapolations there. Now, if I'm in a job that has some capability to be done while I'm at home, as Michelle just alluded to, that's really a conversation for ad hoc telework between you and your supervisor. But you have to have the basis and the framework and the agreements and the understanding and, frankly, the technology before you decide to stay home and try to telework. You can't just call in the morning and go, I know I've never done this before, boss, but today's the day I'm going to start teleworking. It has to be arranged and provisioned in advance. Does that track, Michelle?
Yes, sir. And just, we're aware of some situations where the employee is well enough to work 2 hours and a modified, I'll get on in the afternoon after I rest, take medication. So definitely it depends answer. So on the supervisor and the situation.
I want to add something. Let's go situational telework pre-pandemic. So it was situational. You have to be code 2 in DCPS, which we're going to have to go through and code everything. We have to correct the codings because right now the numbers we have, we pull from the database, aren't correct because we picked up and we went home to isolate, which we did great here on this base. And kudos to the general for actually implementing that and keeping our installation probably one of the best in the United States from the numbers I've seen. But pre-pandemic, ad hoc, what that meant was I have a medical appointment. Hey, can I telework? I'm code 2 in DCPS. I have a computer. I have comm lines. I have a report I'm going to review. I'm good for 8 or 6 hours, and then I'm going to go to a doctor's office for 2 hours. What do you think, boss? Is that okay? That's exactly what it was in place for, are those situations. Also, weather, inclement weather. If we have a snowstorm in the valley, sometimes it happens in March. We haven't had it yet. Right? But you get snow, and then the installation says, you know what, it's not safe for everyone to drive home. Some of those that are, he can declare inclement weather, and then you could use situational at that point too. And if you know it's going to happen, you take your stuff home, and if you're eligible to telework and be productive, by all means, we want you to work, right? So those are some of the situations that were before the pandemic that are still going to be in play. I think the question that you have is it would be how Michelle answered it. It depends on the individual, right? If we're still in the pandemic situation and if you're not feeling well, we don't want you coming into work and exposing other people, right? We're still in a protective mode, so it really depends. So I want to be careful of saying, yeah, you have to come in if you're sick, you're going to use your sick time. So we still want, we're wearing masks for reasons, right? But that's still in the decision space of the supervisor.
Yeah, if the basis of that question, whoever asked it, is I'm told to quarantine, or I might be at risk of quarantine, or I'm in isolation, and you don't want to burn sick leave to do that, there are very specific rules and guidelines that have been in existence for months in the pandemic that would address the COVID-19 obligations for charging and pay. And so we're trying to talk about new normal, not necessarily pandemic normal. So there are very, very good rules in place. And if you have a question about what's appropriate, if you are sick, then you are sick. If you're home because you have to be, because you're isolation or quarantine, there are other charging rules that don't necessarily require you to burn sick leave. So I think we've covered that one. If there's anything you want to reattack on, please do that. Chief, what you got for us next?
Okay, sir. Where will the decision authority be for the different types of telework, e.g. remote versus local? Where does that decision authority lie?
Yeah, so this is this is like everything else. It starts with a conversation between the employee and their supervisor. If you are a new hire, my hope is that you've had that conversation as part of the hiring process. And that as an employee, you actually have a copy of your position description if you're a GS employee, or your position requirements document, your PRD, if you're an ACT demo employee. That document needs to have some type of hook or some type of something written in it that there is full-time, part-time, or ad hoc telework options in there. And if it doesn't, that's something that you as the employee need to talk about with your supervisor, so we can either have an addendum attached to that, or we can rev it in its entirety to make sure that the job shows that you are eligible. So the first step in the process, like 99.99% of everything you do as an employee, is to have an open and frank conversation with your supervisor about that. If you and your supervisor think there is a legitimate opportunity for you to telework, then that's where we get into the guidance and the local flow. There's an approval process that will flow up, and depending on what you want to do, where you want to do it, how much, and who you are, different approval chains exist for civilians versus active duty. That is all in the written guidance. If we want to get into those details later, and we have the minutes to do so, I'd be happy to go through it. But it's all in the written guidance. The HRLs, Ms. Amadio and Ms. Lovato can answer those questions for supervisors, directors, and commanders. But starts with your supervisor and then goes up from there. So let me pivot right now real fast. If your supervisor says you have to telework and you say, I don't want to telework, that's probably unlikely. But the other way around is probably highly likely. Hey, boss, I've been doing really well teleworking for the last year. What do you mean I have to come back to the office now? I want to continue teleworking. Well, go home because there's a pandemic and here's a public health emergency is a very different push to telework than an enduring telework agreement. And so if there's a disparity between you and your supervisor over either your fitness, personal fitness for telework, or your position eligibility for telework, then that's something that I encourage you to talk up your chain about. If you aren't comfortable talking up your chain of command about, then get a hold of Joan or Michelle direct, and they can potentially talk you through that scenario. I am willing to adjudicate those if it's necessary. Dano is willing to adjudicate those if it's necessary. But if you and your supervisor disagree, that's not the end of the story. So I think that's an important thing to knock out right there. Go ahead, Chief.
I appreciate that, sir. You answered at least 3 of the other questions. So you cut us a little bit of time there.
So keep them coming, folks.
Yes, please keep them coming.
Yes, absolutely. We do have other things that we can get to, but I got the experts here, so let's give them some really hard ones.
One thing to that?
Absolutely,
okay.
Daniel, please.
So we are working an ESSS to staff it up right now on the telework, on the form. So first is your supervisor, then it's going to be your group commander too for the organizational structure to make sure that everything's balanced correctly and that organization can take that type of telework. So that's how it's going to start to come up, and we are working that, and that'll be coming out soon. It's not out yet. Right. I encourage you to go read the guidelines. There's exact examples of those, Chief, that you just answered. Question 15 and question 1 are two of them right out of the frequently asked questions that talk about how you communicate and the decision. So good questions, but the guidance is in there, so I encourage you to go look at that.
Sweet.
So again, when all else fails, talk to your supervisor and work it out and go up and mediate what you need to with the right folks. Next question. So if you are a Matrix employee and your current position is remote work eligible, can you be approved to be a remote worker knowing a future need may require your duties to change?
So there's a whole bunch of complexity in that question.
Way more than I understood, sir. Yes.
Yeah, so matrixed is an important nuance there, and the word remote. So we're going to answer the question precisely. We have a concept here in multiple groups across the 412 test wing and frankly the larger enterprise here of matrixed personnel. And what you need to do, where you need to do it, is an agreement between not one, but two chains of command. The chain of command that owns you from an administrative perspective, where at Edwards we call that chain the home office. And so Dano ran a home office in his previous job as the director of the test engineering group, which is now Mr. Staley's group. There are 80% probably of the group.
About 60%.
60% that are matrixed out from that group. So your position in the group, your administrative chain, who actually owns in almost every case, your PRD, because you're an ACT demo employee, will get an opinion or a vote or say in whether or not you are remote eligible. But you are matrixed out to different organizations, typically to a combined task force. And the combined task force commander, in most cases, director in a couple, also gets to vote on whether or not you are physically needed in the CTF on a daily, weekly, monthly, or recurring basis. And I'll come up with a hypothetical example, and I'll use two programs. So if you are a handling qualities, flying qualities, or propulsion, or some type of discipline engineer, you are going to be AdCon to the test engineering group. If you are currently working the T7 program, that program, as of today, has nothing in it that's classified. And so almost all of the stuff you'll touch and the things you would potentially need to participate in, with the exception of test execution, so I'm leaving out the control room here for a second, briefings and debriefings. But as far as your planning, analysis, and reporting would go, everything's unclassified. That is a much more compatible, matrixed, remote eligible job than if we later go, you know what, thanks for your awesome work on T7, but we now need you to go work F-35. or a fully classified program in the not too distant future where nothing you can touch is unclassified and everything is behind a vault door. So in that case, that job would not be remote work compatible. It may have some limited telework compatibility, but it wouldn't. Now that's a hypothetical. Daniel could probably come up with some actual real life examples, but that's at a high level, there's one example there. And then you'd get into the, well, do I have to change from one CTF to the other? And let me answer that question right now. We're not going to try and shove someone where you don't want to be, and we'll take into consideration your desires and your requests. But if we need you to do something as a nation and as a service and as an installation, we need you to do something. And typically those are fantastic opportunities in the hypothetical that I just described, moving from one program to another for your growth, your development, and the excitement. So, Daniel, anything else you want to pop on?
Good example, sir.
Top level?
I think the chief's question there is pretty loaded. We have the Matrix organizations that are here at Edwards proper. We have OLs as well. So it really depends on the OLs. We have people that are at Tucson, right, that are OL in engineering. So that question has a lot to it. It'd have to be very specific, which is exactly the reason the supervisor is the first discussion point, because of those intricacies that happen. You can't write policy for every single one off on that. So, but I think your example with the T7 is perfect, sir.
Okay, great. Michelle, anything you want to correct us on?
I would just add that as a Air Force, we promote telework. We're not promoting one category or another. That's left to the mission, objectives, and the supervisors and commanders. So I think part of that question is what happens if you have to terminate it. So
if you're matrixed and you change jobs, can you remain remote? That was the gist of the question.
Yeah.
So part of the guidance, and just keep in mind, prior to COVID, we were not a remote telework organization. I think the coding was one job. So just keep in mind, we know that we're ready to help and assist as we move forward in identifying remote. So I don't have much experience to add. However, looking at the guidance, just understand that any telework agreement based any category can be terminated due to mission needs, and anything that jeopardizes the mission or a needs change, right? So as we move forward, what we know today may change in the future. So that's why these agreements are for 2 years, sir. And as we move into remote, we will look to Air Force level guidance to ensure that we are consistent and compliant with Air Force policies. So I just want to say, we promote telework. However, one category is not going to be the policy for everybody. So please put in your requests. And this is very helpful, I think, for supervisors to understand how we navigate the future. But keep in mind, it's not entitlement, and that it could change and could be terminated based on Air Force requirements.
Yeah. Let me give a something that's potentially a misconception, and I've got a lawyer here to what the general meant to say. So get ready, Dale, and Joan, you can help him out too. When you are permitted by agreement, which is an awesome opportunity, and if it works for you and your life and your family, I encourage you strongly to take it and do it, please. And I encourage you to advertise it and broadcast it and talk about how much the Air Force has grown in this specific lane the last year. If you are eligible and you and your supervisor agree and the paperwork processes, it is not you're in the office or you are wherever you want to be on the planet, wherever you happen to have a Wi-Fi connection. Your telework agreement says your alternate duty location, singular, per agreement, is a specific location. And if that's your house, no problem. If that's some other, I don't know, WeWork location, I guess that in theory could work, but it's a specific location. And the nuance of that is extremely important. Does that mean you could have 2 alternate locations? Maybe. I think that's a possibility, but they're specific. They're not generic. And you can't have it just like Southern California or Western United States or CONUS, right? There's an important thing as a supervisor of civilians, and as a civilian, you need to keep into consideration very strongly. And that is if you are teleworking and you are being paid to live in this locality and you have moved or you plan to move, your locality pay will be at the place you live, not the place where your job is attached. So a non-hypothetical example is that if you are being paid SoCal locality pay because your job is at Edwards Air Force Base, and you have been in effectively full-time telework status for the pandemic, and you and your family, or maybe you're single, you have decided that Las Vegas is a much better place for you and it's a lower cost of living. When that becomes your, well, frankly, it became your alternate duty location when you moved there, but when the paperwork catches up to that, there will be a pay adjustment required, and there may be a recoupment of overpayment based on how long you've been there. And so be very, very deliberate, be as candid and as transparent as you can with your supervisors on where you live, where you want to live, and why. There's probably a good way for us to get there, but it is not a panacea. And that example of SoCal locality pay people living in Las Vegas, I wish that was a hypothetical, but I get dollars to donuts bet that there are a couple of people that have been agile and innovative and are doing that. So good on you, but we need to get it on paper and get to right on that. So that's a cautionary tale, but it works. Where are the areas that I see remote being fantastic? I see them in a retention perspective. We have an example that Dano and I are working on right now of a high-performing NH employee, high-performing, that for family reasons needs to leave California and go to another state where there happens to be a large AFMC installation. And so he told us, I've got to go, I'm sorry, we've already hired his replacement. What we are trying to line up for this employee is to put him in some type of a telework or potentially remote status at that new location and keep him in the 412 test wing and the Air Force Test Center family and fold. I think with the guidance that we have hitting the street, the demonstrated high performance of this high quality leader and an engineer for more than a decade, I think that's we're going to get him to the finish line and keep him on the 412 team such that in 5, 10, I don't know how many years, when his family scenario changes or resolves, he has an option to return back to Edwards, and he's actually never left our community, never left our fold. So in that case, we retain somebody that we may not have been able to retain otherwise. So that's another good example of how this is going to help us generate mission. Okay, Chief.
Sir, you have two questions following in order from what you were talking about. Stem directly off what you were saying.
Perfect.
First, I think is probably an easy answer, but not easily defined. What is the local area?
So I love that question. It's happened the whole pandemic. Is Quartz Hill local area? Sure. What about Santa Clarita? Probably. What about Burbank? That's a tough call. Is Tehachapi good? Yes. What about Bakersfield? I don't know, right? So unlike military local area definition, which I can purely define and is well covered by AFI, it is a lot less, it's a lot fuzzier at the boundary. And the way that I recommend supervisors look at that and ask for advice of the CPO, and that CPO is going to talk to legal on this, is that you're going to have to apply some type of a reasonableness test, which will typically be a safety thing. So for it to be the local area, I would like to see, this is not policy, Dale, so don't write this down, but as an example, I would like to see you being able to be at your physical work location on Edwards or Plant 42 for about a 9-hour period, so an 8-hour day or whatever your day is, plus an hour or so for lunch and breaks, plus your commute time, plus a reasonable amount of personal time and sleep, right? And so if you are further and further and further away, you put pressure on your sleep time because of your drive time, and eventually that doesn't work and it doesn't pass the reasonableness test anymore. Now that's a very squishy answer, so the lawyers are going to make that a little bit more nuanced, but that's a tough boundary question. It is not going to be a very thin black line drawn out. I think it's going to be inside this bubble, no problem. Outside this larger bubble, not a chance. And in this gray area, it will depend. Because, for example, you could have a modified work schedule. And you could have 2 places that you sleep, right? So there are instructors at test pilot school that drive here at the beginning of their fly week. They stay on base or just off base for those nights. And at the end of that week, be it 3, 4, or 5 days, they go back down to a larger location. So that's an example of a real example. and that person lives locally, well, used to do building until prices went through the roof. Thank you, services agency or services center. And then lives the rest of the time down in Santa Monica. Santa Monica is definitely not a daily commute. There's a person in the room with us right now that has 2 places that he lives, one of them being San Diego or the greater area, and the other being local. I will also not call out him or his specific job, but those are hybrid examples. So it's a fantastic question that there's no way we could specifically answer it, but you and your supervisor can get to right, and there will be some nuances in there.
So just in case it comes into play, and I think this might need expansion, how does locality pay fold into that? Like, where does that line exist, or does that line even exist? How does that decision point come in?
And Michelle, I'll let you try and hit that one. I've got some thoughts there too.
So the question, as I understand it, is how do you determine not locality, commuting area, but the pay when it affects what pay table you apply to?
I'm actually not sure which one it was. That's why
Okay.
I asked. The literal question was, what is the definition of local area?
Okay.
But that came in right as we were talking about locality pay. So answering both versions of that is probably wise.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for consideration of local commuting area, I would advise employees and supervisors when you're having that telework discussion. So regular reoccurring and full-time have a requirement you are subject to recall. So if you live in the northern part of Kern County or the most southern part of LA County, can you be recalled? And Joan can look up the time. I think it's within 2 hours.
2 hours, yeah.
2 hours.
Yeah.
All right, our phone a friend. Thanks, Joan.
So thank you, Joan. So if you are subject to recall on a regular reoccurring and a situational and a full-time, that is the distance and consideration. So you meet the telework agreement, employee. So for pay purposes, those 3 conditions, your work site, your duty location is still Edwards Air Force Base. So we're not going to affect your pay. It's when we get into working outside the geographical area, meaning the remote worker. And again, we as a test wing do not have a lot of examples, but I will tell you, if you leave California, let's say for example, you move out of state, you are required, employee and supervisor, to, 1, obtain approvals before you leave. This is a point I want to make. You are not authorized to go until you've, 1, received approval from the approval authority for full-time and telework. So part of that is we need to ensure that we are compliant with DOD and OPM policy regarding pay. So let's say, for example, you move out of state. Once that's approved properly, civilian personnel will process the pay adjustment, as General Higer mentioned. And now your duty location is no longer Edwards Air Force Base, because you are in a permanent remote location. You're not required, you're not subject to recall. So therefore, your duty location on your PRD, PD, in the DCPDS system is, let's say, San Antonio, Texas. We're going to find the pay table that applies to that San Antonio, Texas, and your pay will change. And if you proceed without proper approvals, you could be subject to a debt to go back to when you first became a full-time remote teleworker. So you have to take into consideration, we have civilians that live all over Southern California, but their telework agreement and their duty location is still Edwards Air Force Base, so your locality pay applies to the Los Angeles.
Dan, I get the general rule of thumb. Go back to pre-pandemic, all right? You drive to work. If you're outside the 2 hour kind of driving commute, you're kind of pushing it, right, for the job location. We have people that live in different areas, but then they stay up here in the local area. So I would use that as the general rule of thumb on what civilian local area is. I would use what you decided to take the job here at Edwards to drive here daily.
Right.
Like, common sense on that.
Yeah, so Joan Joan answered the question 2 hours. Michelle hit there's a term that flips. If you are not living and your alternate duty location is not in the, what we decide as the local area, you're not teleworking. You're a remote worker.
Yes, sir.
And then your duty location becomes whatever your alternate work location is. And that's an important nuance. Now, let me give you guys some perspective on this. I'm in the room right now with two of about a handful of experts on this topic, Joan and Michelle. Their shop is, I heard this morning, and I wrote it down and then forgot the piece of paper, 10 with 6 filled. Did I get that right?
20 with 16.
All right,
billings.
similar ratio. 20 total people, 4 vacancies. So they're at 75% manned or filled right now. And they do a crazy amount of things that are not just process telework agreements. So they can get to your question, they can get to your answer. Don't expect it instantaneously. And that's why I've directed the wing writ large at the group level to have telework experts, telework Office of Primary Responsibility. It's not going to be the group director or commander. It's not going to be a squadron director or commander. And I'd strongly prefer that it not be one of your HRLs, but somebody else that's going to be good at this and be able to work on some, not homogeneity, but some balancing of what you do in your mission area for telework. And once those folks are up and running and established, that'll be a really good focal point for you to ask a lot of these questions on. And so that's really important. Another thing by the numbers, Joan, if you can refresh us on, as of the last time you counted, how many people are remote for the 412 test wing?
There's 2.
Daniel says 2.
I'm sorry, yes, sir, there's 2. I was just verifying it.
Yes, okay. And then, and so it's 2. Now that's 2 more than we had, I think, quite a while ago, and that number may go up. Yeah. The total number of people, civilians, that we service in the 412 test wing from your office, Michelle, you told me earlier today?
About 7,000, and civil servants on the manning document is 3,400.
Yeah, 3,400 in my wing.
Local.
More than double that this office services for the civilians on the installation. So 20 positions, 16 people, servicing the needs of more than 7,000. Of the 7,000, how many do we have if we look at different sources that are in some type of telework right now?
I have 1840, sir.
Yeah, so 1,800 and change. My gut tells me that that's probably a little bit more than 2,000 that are doing something there. So that is also probably a couple thousand more than we had doing that work before the pandemic. So we've made a good shift. A lot of those will end up staying there. So the transition will not be a snap change. It'll be a transition period, but you need to trend toward what you want to be your new normal. And I think that's an important thing. So if there's a screaming question, I'll take it over. I'll go over time a little bit more on that. But just to drive home the point that it isn't always one topic in this, I'm not going to make Chief come on camera for this, but I'm going to do a visual reference. There's an important thing happening in April. I'm removing my black mask. And, ladies and gentlemen, Patriots all, purple up. And if you don't know what purple up means, it's the phrase, the battle cry, really, the chant for the month of the military child. I happen to live with a couple. They're fantastic people, despite their father. But I think this is an important thing for us to foot stomp. It's April 2nd. We did a proclamation ceremony with Mrs. Brown and a couple of folks at the CDC yesterday. But it isn't just about a proclamation and photo ops and PA things. It's really about the military kids and letting them know how important they are. So if you have an opportunity, and I'm taking a little bit of liberty, and I know orange and purple don't go well together at all, but if you have an opportunity to wear something purple this month and tell a kid to purple up, give them a thumbs up, and let them know how important they are. And when I say month of the military child, I am very happy to include the children of our civilian airmen too. Right? Because they are all contributors and sacrificing for the mission that we all do as airmen, serving in the Air Force and serving our nation as Big A airmen. So it's the month of the military child. Okay, boss, April's the month of the military child. That's cool. Purple mask isn't working so well. So what? Well, the so what is there are activities most days for the rest of this month dedicated or highlighting or honoring our military kids. So the actual purple up day, so if you only want to break fashion trends one day, it's Friday the 16th of April. And you're going to see a lot of purple on that day. So purple up is April 16th. Next week, Monday through Friday is the Missoula Play workshops, Monday through Friday every day. I'm going to have to phone a friend, plead a little ignorance on what that is. But for details, I'll pivot over to Chief Thompson. So, Chief, if you could tell us real quick, or you got a phone a friend calling already. Missoula Play workshops.
Yes, sir. Okay, so first I would say get details by going out to the FSS webpage and looking there. I believe normally it runs through the library, but I'm not positive about that. What they do is they bring in a professional actor or actress, somebody that has a proven reputation. They'll get the children that sign up for this. They'll bring them all together, and they will put them through kind of a drama club for the week. And then at the end of that week, they have practice, they have a play put together, and they actually conduct the play for an audience. And so in the past ones that I've been to, they've been incredible. Children of all ages actually love it, and you can see the excitement from them when they're up on the stage going through it, and they learn something from it too.
Sweet.
And I would like to think for a lot of them, it kind of inspires them to go and to do other things as they go through middle school and high school as well.
Sweet. I love it. So Chief is right. If you have any questions, FSS is the place to go. Candace Lang is the lead, but there are a whole bunch of folks that are involved in the Month of the Military Child activities. If you don't find it on the website, you can text in this number and go, I can't find it, where is it? And we'll get it back to you. You can walk into the CDC or walk to the CDC or any FSS facility like the youth center, so behind the bowling alley. They'll have information on that as well. So Month of the Military Child, if you are or you happen to reside with a military child, thank you. Thank you to the kids and the sacrifices that they make to be a big part of our team, and quite frankly, the motivation for so much of what we do and what we sacrifice and what we strive to be as a service and people and as a nation. So hats off to you, military kids. Chief, anything in the questions that you think we just can't end without?
Nothing in particular, sir. Nothing I can't field afterwards in reply.
Okay,
So
terrific.
we're fine.
So folks, if we didn't get to your question, that doesn't mean we won't get an answer back to you. We'll either defer it to a future broadcast, or Chief will hand it off to somebody and get you an answer direct. Chief, any thoughts before we close for the week?
All I would say is we have a lot of activities coming up on base over the next month. Again, Month of the Military Child, lots of family time coming up. Spring is here. Would like everybody to stay safe. Keep everyone in your thoughts that need attention, that need a little bit more of the love and care that they're not getting. We know we're coming out of COVID. We know that some restrictions are loosening across the state, but that doesn't mean we let up on taking care of one another. It means we learn from that and we care for one another even more than we had before COVID. Keep that up, and just everybody stay safe.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Joan, anything you want to correct us on?
Oh, no, sir.
I am so glad you were here because the questions were not tough. I guarantee that if you weren't here, I would have been shellacked, right? So thank you to both you and Michelle for being here. Dale, same thanks to you. Anything else?
Negative, sir. Thank you.
All right. Michelle?
No, sir, just want to put out there, more information will flow as we receive. So start preparing to review your telework agreements sometime in June. And we're CPO is a resource to you.
Fantastic. Dano?
Yeah, just main thing, right? You're the most important to me. You always have been. So I want you to understand that we are here to support you, and we're going to do whatever we can within the guidelines. It's got to be legal, moral, and ethical, and then we're going to do it, right? But it is all about you and the mission. We have a great mission. We had the Chief of Staff of the Air Force here yesterday. We saw an amazing air show that was just unphenomenal. The best F-22, it's hard for me to say as an F-35 guy, right? But F-22, I don't know how the demo pilot was able to hold it the vertical that long. Totally impressive. But, we had a great tour with the Chief. They did the commercial shooting here. There's lots to be proud of here. So I hope you all have that pride in you. And if you didn't see the air show, and you were at home, all I could say was it was amazing. And I was glad I was here on base yesterday watching that outside. And it really fired me up for the week. So
Agree. So Dano's right. It was a heck of a week for Edwards. But candidly, it was a normal week for Edwards. We are always doing things, breaking new barriers, plowing new ground, whatever your analogy is. The shooting that was happening, or the demonstrations that were happening airborne that we termed the mini air show, for the demo pilots, F-22, F-35, and A-10, by the way, were part of a commercial shoot that Air Force Recruiting Service was filming on the installation. Big segments of those commercials are going to star General Brown, our Chief of Staff. But you know who the bigger star in those commercials is going to be? The hangars, the taxiways, the runways, the ground, the sky of this place, the center of the aerospace testing universe. And that gives me such pride to know that for generations of airmen in the future, they're going to see a commercial of this place and this space and say, that's awesome, I want to join that. General Brown's an important aspect of that, but he'll be the first to tell you that it is the larger mission and the larger people and the larger places that make all the difference. So there was a sidebar we had earlier in the week that Edwards Air Force Base needs its own IMDb page. I'll get Disco on that, but I think so. And this is yet one more item that the Hangar 1600 and Edwards Air Force Base will be a part of as these commercials release. When they release, Edwards is going to get a first look. So if you did miss the mini air show that was here, it'll be a starring role in a couple of those commercials. And I look forward to being at that release party, hopefully with a couple thousand of my closest friends. Maybe not in person, but pretty darn close. So folks, as Dano said, and you hear it from us often, but it is always heartfelt and it's always extremely serious. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you do for our nation. Thank you for what you do for each other. One of the things that I'm going to break right now and go film a segment on is vaccines. So if you are eligible for a vaccine, please go get one. It's still voluntary for everyone, but it will be widely available for anyone that wants one this month. And that's a commitment that the United States has made to all of its citizens, and we will have them available both on the base and out in the community. If you'd like more details on that, it's on our edwards.af.mil website, and you can also go to the California site and get more information there. So I appreciate that in advance. So take care of yourself. Enjoy the weekend. Remember, we're not out of the woods yet. A lot of places have rebounded. I'm confident that's not going to be us because we're all going to do our part. And remember, this broadcast with your questions and topics that if you want to text in a topic, great. We'll take it, we'll put some thought into it, and we'll make it part of the broadcast, and we're always happy to take your questions in real time, too. This broadcast will be here every Duty Day Friday, 1300, and we'll always have a stellar lineup of folks that can talk to you and interact with you, but it wouldn't happen without you. So thank you. Enjoy your weekend, and if you celebrate it, Happy Easter.